everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today at Re-Written Vintage Homestead. I'm out here in my shed where I have moved all of my plants. I have been working and working because I have some goals I want to reach this summer. But you guys, this week while I've been working, there's been so much going on nationally that's caught my attention that I wanted to talk to you about. And one of those is Darwin's theory of evolution. And how does that pertain to the homestead? Let's talk about it. Some of what Darwin discovered and put out in his papers and his writings and his books, it has been proven just recently. DNA wasn't even around during, I think it had just come out during the O.J. Simpson trial. That's why it was so questionable. People didn't really trust it at that time. So he was really ahead in his thinking. So this week, Darwin and Christianity came to the forefront again due to Tucker Carlson having an interview with, I think his name is Charles Rogan. I know his last name's Rogan, who has a podcast. During their interview, Tucker started talking about evolution and poo-pooed it. Joe Rogan, that's his name. And, Joe was questioning him on it. And Tucker said, well, I think we can, modern day science has shown that there was too many flaws in Darwin's theory of evolution. So it's kind of been thrown by the wayside. His argument was that there is no fossil record of man from a cell to now, to what we've become now. So there's no way of telling how there's no way of proving that we came from one organism and that we evolved from ape. Okay. And that the finch that we see here in the Midwest may have evolved from a finch in the Galapagos Islands, but they've adapted differently. That there's no fossil record that they've come from one type of organism. And I think it's just kind of the same as with families. I imagine you could take DNA from a bird and be able to trace what lineage that bird came from, right? If we started keeping records like that. But a lot of people, of course, jumped on, oh, Tucker's such a nut, Tucker this, Tucker that. And, siding with Joe Rogan about evolution. And I just started thinking about it. And I don't know why we always have to be so hard-assed on everything. Why can't you take some of one thing and some of another thing, still be a Christian, still have your beliefs, but maybe look at the other side, or maybe be the other side and look at Christianity. And actually, that's kind of what happened to Darwin. So Joe Rogan asked, well, if you don't believe in evolution, then where do you think this all came from? And Tucker said, God. Came from God. That's my belief too. I think everything came from God. And who's to say that evolution of animals, plants, the way people change over time and in lineage isn't from God either? Because no one has been able to ever show that we all came from one little organism. What happened to that little organism that brought all this? They can't explain it. That's always been the big bang question. What caused it? And no one can. Do you know how everything would have to be aligned just perfectly in science to bring all of this about? And the odds of that are just phenomenal. So I just, no one can convince me that it was not God. And don't, we have a personal relationship with God, and we all have our own beliefs about God. But I think a lot of times it's lost on us just how powerful and great our God is. So Darwin was a very complex person, and his father was an intellectual, uh, physician, free thinker. His mother was more religious, as were his sisters. And so he grew up in the church. His sisters brought him up when his mother no longer could take him to church. Um, he had a hard time gaining his dad's approval. Um, so at one point in his career, he was going to become a pastor, and he went to theology school. But he could never quite shake um, his interest in zoology and animals. But a lot of that was because he was questioning things in the Bible, and he was questioning how things could have happened. And he always had a real internal struggle with suffering. Why would God create one animal just so another animal could kill it and eat it? That's the point of life for this animal here, is to just be food for this one. It's just pure suffering. And he really questioned the Old Testament. And so he had an internal struggle with God. And I think that kind of led him to looking at animals, looking at nature, and trying to figure out some things within himself. Something else you don't hear much of, I did a paper on this when I was in college, and Darwin's theory of evolution, his book that he finally published, came out 2 years before the start of the Civil War. Darwin and his family were abolitionists. They hated slavery. They hated human suffering. They hated the suffering of animals. And so, at that time, the argument against evolution by some scientists was brain size. And they would measure a slave's brain, which would be a different size, actually smaller than the European brain. So they would say, how scientific is this? They would say, see, they are not as smart as us because their brains are smaller. So they're not of the same species as we are. And so they are born to be slaves. They're born to suffer because we are the smarter race. Well, Darwin absolutely rejected that idea. And so you can see how by being able to prove that this bird evolved into this bird and evolved into this bird and then this bird, uh, he could say the African man, evolved from this human species and this human species, and that's where the European man came from. In other words, we're all connected. We're all one. So one is not superior over the other. And that would have been a great argument for anti slavery at that time. He also questioned, like I said before, the Bible, especially the Old Testament of the Bible. And it kind of got worse as time went on. Now, his wife was very religious, strictly religious, and it really bothered her, a lot of his thoughts. But they lost a daughter. He even said, "This is my favorite child," and she became sick and was just tortured with vomiting and fever and illness, and died. And boy, that just crushed him. So he began to question, how could God, just like we all do, allow that to happen? How could he not intervene? How could suffering happen like that? Well, by his theory of evolution, he was able to show there is no God, right? So he gave a really good argument to agnostics. And he would talk later in life, and he would say he wrote thousands and thousands of notes and papers. He's another one of those that you didn't really have to question how he thought. It was written somewhere. And you can see there were times that he did question if there was a God. And then there was other times that he questioned, I think there is a God. I think maybe they could work together. Maybe they're one and the same. Maybe something's missing here or maybe something's missing there. It kind of depended what was going on in his life. And then later on in his life, he said he thought he could be best described as an agnostic. So he didn't know, right? I don't know. There could be a God, there could not be a God. I have no idea. In my scientific research, I've not been able to figure it out. I mean, that's fair, isn't it? He didn't say I'm an atheist and I don't believe it. My scientific research has shown there isn't one. He still said, I don't know. I guess you could call me an agnostic. Now, supposedly, a friend of his came to visit him and found him reading the Bible. And that wouldn't surprise me because throughout his life, he did question things and he was still trying to work them out. Does that mean he became a Christian in later life? Well, you can read the Bible without becoming a Christian, right? So I just find the whole thing so interesting. And one of the main, I don't want to say topics, that's not right, but one of the main points of the theory of evolution is that you adapt so that you get to this point where it's kind of like natural selection. So only the fittest will survive. So a bird who's living in an area where he needs to crack nuts, over time, their beak gets tougher and tougher and larger and tougher so they can crack that nut. So it's going to be that bird that survives over the other ones because it had learned to adapt. I think there's some truth in that. We see animals adapting all the time, don't we? People adapt all the time to their weather conditions and to their living conditions and things like that. I think one thing that Darwin maybe left out of the equation because he wasn't looking at it from a religious point of view was sin. What I mean by that is I could have a friend that exercises every day, eats so healthy, stays mentally strong, this type of thing, so that they would be fitter than me in many, many aspects. We could be the same age, grew up the same, etc. But for some reason, that person really, really likes alcohol. And they drink and they drink and they drink until their liver fails, right? So does that mean that I was the fittest of the two of us? I don't think so. I think that person was more fit, but sin had entered their life. So it kind of threw that equation out of whack. And I think the same could be said for other species too. If they don't listen to their master and they run out in the road and get hit by a car, that isn't so much of a sin, but that dog who may be perfectly healthy and smart and could have just went with instinct and no longer here. So there's a lot that plays into that. But I do believe that, such as with plants and animals, with plants, the stronger of the plants will survive because the wind, the rain, storms, people can kill the plant. And with animals, we already see that they have hierarchies, within their herds and their families. They have a leader, a strong leader who is in charge. And so, what I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm taking some of what I think Darwin was right about and some of what I know the Bible is right about and putting them together and saying, what if it's all the same thing? So these little beauties started off with seed, and once they came up, they were separated, and in each pot were 2 or 3, and now it's survival of the fittest time, and that's what I'm doing here. So in each pot, I usually pick the one that is the strongest, and I leave that one there. Now this one looks pretty good as well, but I'm going to separate that and put it into this one. Now, if it was just a small plant that was sucking, energy, water, resources from this one, I would pull it and leave the stronger one. So what I'm trying to do now is get down to 1 plant per pot. Something else that happened this week that was a real hard pill to swallow was our Senate and our House, the Republican majority, slight majority, helped the Democrats pass this humongous 90-some billion-dollar bill for more aid to Ukraine, the Gaza Strip, Israel. That's all great. We're humanitarians. But at the beginning, Speaker Johnson was saying, we're not passing anything to help anybody else until we get our borders shut down. That's the way it is. That's the line, that's the line in the sand. And guess what? They passed that bill. We're giving aid to all of these other foreign countries, but nothing got done about our own borders. Nothing. So they're still pouring in people we don't know. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what diseases they have. We don't know if they're from a mental institution or if they're a criminal from another country. And we know nothing about them. We're not vetting them in any way. They are taking jobs. I live in the Midwest. I live in the state of Illinois. And in Chicago especially, African Americans are very upset because schools, after school programs, recreation centers are being closed to house these people that are being shipped there. So they're losing resources, they're losing money and things that kept their kids safe and out of trouble and taught them skills. They're losing all of these things, and they are United States citizens here legally. They're losing all of this funding to people who are here illegally. And, it's just so sad. And you guys, our government is not going to save us. They're all the same, Republican, Democrat. They might as well just all become one party because they're all a bunch of crooks. I say all. There's a couple good ones in there here and there, but really the swamp is so deep and muddy and mucky and full of algae and liars and stuff that we can't depend on them to look out for us. They're not looking out for us. And once again, I thought of survival of the fittest and how it relates to the homestead. I just want to re-emphasize to all of you who are my friends and family and followers and like-minded thinkers that now is the time to come up with a plan. And I'm not talking about a doomsday plan, the world's going to end, that kind of thing. That's not what I mean. But there could be food shortages. There could be job shortages. It could be you can't get in to see your doctor or get into the emergency room because they are so backlogged with people that are here illegally that they have to see, they're being forced to see, and you can't get in. Food shortages, shipping again, all of these things. The price of gas, inflation. Inflation has not gotten better. It's absolutely ridiculous what food costs and medicines and the price of gas. And so now is the time to come up with a plan. What are you going to do? And do you have to have acres and acres and acres of land? No. I'm here on a little over an acre, slightly over an acre, but I am putting in as much as I can in food. And I'm going to try to also sell some of that food to make an income here on the homestead. But what about medicinal plants? Are you learning about medicinal plants if you can't get medicine? Can they cure cancer like I have? No, but they can make you feel better. They might be able to help you get rid of that cough or get rid of that headache or that earache. You know, be learning all you can about medicinal plants. What can you forage right now that it's summer? A lot of what you can forage are in the trees and in the flowers. You can make jelly out of lilacs. You can make jelly out of red clover. You can eat the leaves of dandelions. You can make coffee out of the roots of dandelions. You can do all of those things. So learn about foraging. Are there nuts? Can you find nuts? I forage nuts all the time, and I tell you what, they're the best tasting nuts I've ever had. But start looking. Do you have a neighbor with an apple tree, berries, that kind of thing, that they end up on the ground and they get tired of picking them? You know, think outside the box there. Do you have food banks that you can go to in your community? There's no shame in that, you guys, with the price of food the way it is. There is no shame in going to a food bank. You know what happens to the food that they're not able to give away? It goes to a farmer's pigs 9 times out of 10. So you're more important than a farmer's pig, and so is your family. So if you can get that food and can it, freeze it, dehydrate it, make something out of it healthy for you and your family, do it. What can you grow? If you live in an apartment, can you put pots out? Can you put several tomato plants out, a couple peppers, things that you can make meals out of? Do it. Is there a way you can save extra money this month? Somehow, some way. What about transportation? What's your transportation look like? What does your security system look like? Do you have security around your home? If someone broke in and tried to steal from you, do you have cameras? Do you have lights? Look at all of these things. It's not meaning that you're a crazy prepper. It means you are taking care of yourself. There are more people coming in to the United States than are passing away. So eventually you are going to have a lack of resources, and we're going to all be wanting the same resources. So how is that going to affect you? It's going to be survival of the fittest, and you want to be the fittest no matter what your age. You want to be able to get medicine and food and gas and security and water. Start stocking up on your water as well. So you guys, thank you so much for joining me this week. It's really nice talking to everybody. I love your comments. Like, subscribe, and share if you're so inclined. It really helps me out. And I love to hear from you too, by the way. I'm really interested into your comments on this video and what you believe. And I'm open-minded, so hey, I'll listen to whatever you have to say as long as it's respectful and not hateful, okay? But you know, you might want to, I encourage you to read more about Charles Darwin, especially if you have those feelings about yourself and you're trying to find answers. But as much as you learn about Darwin, make sure you pick up that Bible too and read what the Bible says, and then take some time for yourself in quiet solitude. God will talk to you, and you'll be able to put the two kind of together in your own mind, and it'll bring you peace. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.
Pretty, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they're so pretty. Here they are. Yeah, I think they're all kind of working their way up the top here.
Yeah.